Why is healing and addressing your inner child so important for business? And if you have a business or you want to start one, and even if you don't, this will be very helpful for you. So stay with me. I have been teaching and sharing breathwork for the last 25 years, and I've spent a decade as a school counselor working with traumatized children, and I've observed firsthand how children develop, how childhood trauma or unmet needs affect and impact the developing brain. And as I've worked with hundreds of women, helping them figure out what their purpose is, starting their own businesses, what I've realized over time is that typically any block, challenge, problem, pattern that you keep getting into is always a result of something in early childhood, usually between the ages of 0 to 7. And, sometimes people will come to me and say, the only thing that I can remember that happened to me was, in middle school. And a lot of people had a lot of challenging things in middle school because that's typically a very challenging time for people. However, the reason why middle school can be so challenging is because there is always some fundamental unmet need from earlier in childhood. Even if it was something as benign as, your parents were not able to be there for you emotionally, or there was just something you needed that they didn't have the capacity or the capability to give you. And maybe they were busy working, maybe they had other stuff going on, they had their own trauma. And as an adult, you look back on it now and you're like, yeah, I understand that. I understand, my mom was busy, or my dad, didn't have the capacity to show emotions or to spend a lot of time with me. But as a young child, you don't have that perspective. And all you know is that you need something from your caregiver and they are not giving it to you, and they're not capable of giving it to you. And that will create an internalized belief that either you are not good enough, you are not valuable, there's something wrong with you. And then those beliefs will create an imprint or a pattern for how you relate to pretty much everyone and everything moving forward. So for example, if you decided early in childhood that it wasn't safe to express your needs, or it wasn't safe for you to express your feelings, then maybe you would have created a coping mechanism where you try to help everybody else, and that's how you feel safe and that's how you get your needs met. But over time, as you get older, in relationships, if you're always making it about the other person, doing what they want, doing what they need, taking care of them, ultimately you're going to get burnout, you're going to feel resentful, you're going to feel unacknowledged, you're going to feel not valuable. And that coping mechanism that maybe worked for you in childhood is not going to work for you now. And especially if you're wanting to grow or expand in any way. So a lot of the women I work with want to start businesses, or as they go through the process of the metamorphosis and healing, they then decide they want to do something that's more aligned with their purpose, that's more aligned with their authenticity. But what always comes up is some kind of questioning of, well, can I really do this? Do I have something valuable to share? Am I good enough? And all of these are results of what I call the core wound, or this unmet need in childhood that caused you to create a coping mechanism that shows up as a pattern of relating that you continue to create in all areas of your life. And it might show up differently in business than it does in your relationship, than it does with your friends, than it does with your relationship with yourself. But ultimately, it is rooted in the same unmet need, and it has the same energy at its core. And when we address that core, or that core wound, then the way that you show up through all areas of your life changes. And I just want to say that I never set out to do inner child work with people. I actually thought it was kind of cheesy in a lot of ways, because to me it was kind of like just an abstract visualization that didn't seem very tangible to me and didn't feel like something that really landed. However, as I've gone down this path of, growing my own business, healing through breathwork, and working with so many women, what I've realized across the board is that the fastest way to create change, the fastest way to overcome a block or a challenge or a pattern that you keep recreating is to address your inner child, or that moment in childhood where you decided unconsciously that you weren't good enough, and then you created a coping mechanism to deal with it, or you decided you weren't valuable, or you decided that the world is a scary place, or that everything goes wrong for you, or whatever it is. And sometimes these beliefs aren't even a result of how your parents related to you, but also how you watch them relate to the world. I always share this example because it was so powerful for me. I always had a really great relationship with my dad, but as I was going through my own healing process and growing my business, what I realized at a certain point was that I actually took on this belief from him that everything always goes wrong for me, right? He had this unconscious belief, and you could see it show up in the various areas of his life. And I realized that I was holding that belief, and it was showing up in my business. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not even my belief. I just watched my dad have this experience, and I identified with it and took it on as my own, because that's what kids do. We look to our parents and how they are seeing the world, and we're like, oh, okay, well, that must be how the world is. That must be how you relate to things. That must be how you do it. And we take on and identify with these beliefs, but they're not even ours. Sometimes it's not even necessarily a wound as something your parents did do, but it's more just like who they were, that you then took that on as who you are, but it doesn't have to be who you are. So once we can get to whatever that thing is and shift it, and that's why I created my inner child healing process, which is a very simple process to identify when your inner child is triggered and reconcile that wounding so you can ultimately come back into your power, and then you're able to hold your power in every area and circumstance of your life, in your life. And I show you very explicitly how to do that. But once you can do that, then all of those things that seem triggering to you, whether it's, showing up online or bringing in more clients or putting yourself out there, or maybe it's showing up in your relationship with your partner where you always have the same fight, or you always end up feeling like he's not acknowledging you, or whatever it is. Those are all just lenses that you're seeing the world through based on these unmet needs from childhood, or these beliefs that you took on and identified with from your parents. So when you're able to bring awareness to these and then create a practice out of shifting them and coming back to your power, then your life starts to drastically change. And I've seen this with hundreds of women that I've worked with who came in, having a fear of being seen, doubting if they could really start a business, and transform in less than a year to having confidence, and they're clear on what they're meant to do. They're ready to take action. They show up online. They share their business with people. They bring clients in. And, when they came in, they were simply operating as the inner child. They were operating under this belief or seeing things through this lens of who they thought they were, or what they thought they were capable of, or what they thought they had to be. And when we can address those things and reconcile them, then they get to be who they really are in their own authenticity and feel safe doing that. Because a lot of times we have this underlying belief that if we show up in our authenticity, we're going to lose something, because in childhood you learned that you had to be a certain way in order to get your needs met, whatever way that your parents were comfortable with, or you learned to do the things that they wanted you to do so that you could receive love and nurturing and get your needs met. So when you step into your own authenticity, your inner child all of a sudden is like, wait, danger, you're going to lose something. But when we can address the unmet needs of the inner child through the inner child healing process, which includes breathwork, because I use breathwork in a very targeted way to access and pinpoint that moment in time when you created this belief, so that you can create a relationship with your inner child, address that unmet need, give her what she needs so you can come back into your power. So ultimately what you end up doing is, when you're in a situation where you're like, I want to show up online, but I'm afraid of what everyone's going to think. Immediately you're like, oh, that's my inner child who is afraid of rejection because of my relationship with my parents. So instead of thinking it's about showing up online, you ultimately have the awareness that it's about your inner child's fear of rejection or fear of criticism. You address that through the inner child healing process. You process the suppressed emotions underneath of it through the breath work, and you go through the steps to ultimately come back to your power. And then as you get better and better at it, it's easier and easier to hold your power and show up in your authenticity with confidence. And you're able to do that in every area of your life, not just your business, but your relationship with your partner, your kids, your parents, and most importantly, your relationship with yourself. So if you want to learn more about the core wound, you can download my private podcast, The Core Wound Solution. Or you can also purchase my $33 course, The Mini Morphosis, where I take you through the whole inner child healing process. You also get a breathwork session with that. And I have a couple really cool tools for you. I have my inner child healing process flowchart, where it makes it so easy for you to recognize a trigger and shift it, because I literally have you plug in your information and go through the steps. And it's literally like your roadmap to navigate any trigger and ultimately come back to your power. And we'll drop the link for that below too. And always try my breath work as well. It's very targeted to helping you access the subconscious and be able to shift and release suppressed emotions. So you can find those on my channel as well. There's one for accessing your power, one for accessing your higher self. And I definitely recommend doing some journaling when you do the breath work, because that'll really help you process whatever it is that comes up. But if you are somebody who is wanting to start a business or take a step forward that is aligned with your authenticity, and you're having doubts, you're having fear, and you keep kind of like going in circles and not really getting anywhere, then this is something that you definitely want to do, because any woman I've worked with who's applied these tools has created a shift very quickly. So this is definitely something you want to look into. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I put out videos every Wednesday, and they're always about topics like this. So I'd love to have you watch my channel. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from you. Hopefully this was helpful, and I can't wait to see you again soon.